If you're watching this video, there's a good chance you enjoy racing, you like cars, or just like me and many others, you love both. However, both cars and racing are very expensive hobbies, and not everyone has the means to race their personal GT3 RS around the Nordschleife. Luckily for us, there's a less expensive solution: SimRacing. However, just how expensive is SimRacing? This video will cover a few categories, and in each I'll discuss the differences between entry-level sim gear and more advanced gear. These categories will consist of price points for sim gear, price versus quality, pros and cons of sim racing, my recommendation for sim gear, and finally, my personal setup. Before we get into it, I just want to mention that I have my Discord linked in the description and you should definitely consider joining. We've got a small community in there and I definitely want to grow it so I can communicate with more of you guys, so please consider joining. Again, it's linked in the description. Alright, let's get into the video. Before we start with the comparisons and categories, let's go over the basic anatomy of a sim racing setup. First and most importantly, we have the wheelbase. The wheelbase is what connects directly to your console or PC, and it's the beating heart of your setup. The wheelbase provides force feedback, which is what creates tension, vibrations, and track feeling through the wheel. Force feedback is what makes sim racing wheels feel more realistic, and it gives the user more immersion. A good wheelbase is very important. Next is the steering wheel. Obviously, this is an important piece, however, it depends what games you play. You could have a $1,000 wheel or a $50 wheel, they both do the same thing. The wheelbase provides all the realism and the feeling, not the steering wheel. However, a steering wheel with compatible buttons and switches is best, as it allows you to input commands into the game from your wheel, much like a steering wheel in real life. Pedals are the last item in the basics of a sim setup. Pedals are very important and can add or subtract a lot to the realism experience. The most important thing when looking at pedals is the brake resistance. You want a brake pedal that simulates a brake pedal in real life. These three items, the wheelbase, steering wheel, and pedals, create the holy trinity for sim racing. They're the basic items that everyone starts out with. Now obviously you can add more and more accessories like a clutch pedal, stick shift, handbrake, different steering wheels, a kill switch, and much more. However, those are for once you get addicted to spending money on this. You don't have to worry about those right now. Now that we've covered the basics, let's get into the categories. Now obviously, as with any hobby, there's going to be beginner level hardware for sim racing, and it will get more and more advanced from there. First, let's take a look at the entry-level equipment. First, and quite famously, you have the Logitech G29 and G920. These are massively popular and have been for years. The Logitech wheels are perfect for all-around gaming, whichever game you like the most. These wheels are pretty cheap, coming in at around $200 or $300 brand new. For that price, you get a set of pedals, a wheelbase, and a steering wheel. These Logitech wheels have been used by millions of people, and they generally have a good reputation. For such a fair price, you do get good equipment. It's not the best stuff ever, a lot of it is plastic, and the force feedback is decent, but it's still a solid choice for your setup. Thrustmaster also has some good entry-level options. This brand is similar to Logitech, both in terms of price and quality. The T248 wheelbase is popular and very similar to the Logitech bases performance-wise. As for the materials, it's also mostly plastic. However, the T248 has a few more options for customization regarding force feedback. For a wheelbase, pedals, and a steering wheel, this comes in at around $400 brand new. Now, Thrustmaster does have a wider range of products, including a $600 direct drive wheelbase. Direct drive is always better in my opinion, however, the Thrustmaster T818 direct drive has received some mixed reviews from what I've seen. Getting into the higher quality end of things, we have Fanatec. Fanatec is definitely more expensive, but they also have a wide variety of products that span across a large price range. As for wheelbase bundles, they have the CSL DD bundle, which includes a direct drive wheelbase, steering wheel, and pedals for $400. All Fanatec products have an incredible build quality, and they avoid using plastic parts. Fanatec is definitely a higher quality product than Logitech and Thrustmaster, and they've really started to expand into more affordable packages. Along with the cheaper Fanatec bundles, they also have wheelbases like the Podium DD1 and DD2, which both get into the thousands. They also have individual steering wheels that get even more expensive, like the BMW M4 wheel for $1,500. Fanatec pedals can get pretty expensive too, however they continue to come out with cheaper alternatives. Once you get past Fanatec, there are some really cool brands out there producing some high quality sim gear, however most of these brands are smaller companies, so the prices can get pretty high. After learning the different price ranges for sim racing gear, you might be thinking, well, just knowing the prices isn't great, which one has the best quality? Later on I'll get into the best bang for your buck, but if we forget the prices and strictly look at quality, of these three main brands, Fanatec is quality king. Most of the wheels and wheelbases are made of metal, and they avoid plastic as much as possible. For wheelbases, they only offer direct drive, which essentially injects more realism into the wheel. Their steering wheels are high quality and always have customizable options. The pedals are very high quality as well. Even the cheapest set of pedals is made of metal and has impeccable build quality. Fanatec also has a solid software system that allows you to calibrate and adjust your products, such as adjusting the force feedback, natural damper, vibrations, and much more. Compared to Logitech and Thrustmaster, the build quality of Fanatec is just far superior. If we completely disregard the prices and really pick apart the quality, it's no question that Fanatec provides the highest quality sim gear of these three main brands. Before we get into my personal recommendations, and now that we've covered the basics of sim setups, the different price ranges, and the different brands, let's get into the most important thing, the pros and cons of sim racing. First, let's start with the pros. If you're watching this video, I assume you either want to get into sim racing and need more information, or just started and are wondering how expensive this can get. I'll provide some pros and cons that cover both. There are a ton of pros when it comes to sim racing, and the first is realism. If you love cars or racing and often play games like Forza, the F1 titles, Assetto Corsa, GranTurismo, or really any other car game, a sim wheel will completely change your experience for the better. When using a wheel instead of a controller, you unlock an entirely new playing field. Experiencing force feedback in the wheel tells you so much more about the car when driving. By using a wheel and having access to force feedback, you create a much more realistic setting in which you experience your game. Along with simply using a steering wheel and experiencing force feedback, other accessories add to realism too. For example, getting a clutch pedal and a stick shift can really immerse you in a game. In my experience, I've never driven a manual car in real life, which feels like a terrible sin because I love cars so much. In order to fulfill this horrible, endless void in my heart, I purchased a clutch pedal and a stick shift for my sim. Now I can experience driving stick. Even using paddle shifters on a wheel seems so insignificant, but it completely adds to your immersion when playing a racing game. Another pro, and this sounds kinda weird, is that a wheel is actually easier to use than a controller. When driving with a controller, your entire axis of steering relies on around an inch of input from left to right with one of your thumbs. It's very easy to turn too much or too little. With the steering wheel, you access much more precise steering inputs. When you include force feedback, your wheel receives information from the game about your car and transfers it to you through the wheel. This makes it easier to sense lockups when braking, understeer or oversteer, and much more. Driving with a wheel is definitely easier in my opinion. Another pro is faster lap times. Now obviously, if you're really good with a controller, then you'll be fast on whatever game you're playing, but for the most part, if you switch to a wheel, you'll notice a huge uptick in your own lap times and performance around a track. If you want to see some in-depth experiments about this, you can check out this video on my channel once you're done watching this one. There's definitely a huge difference when it comes to lap times between a sim setup and a controller, and you'll notice this change immediately. On top of this, another pro is the customization. When you get a wheel, you're able to map different buttons to different functions in-game. Now obviously you can do this on a controller as well, but using it on a wheel allows for more practicality when doing it. For example, I have my wheels buttons prioritized for what is most comfortable for me. On the F1 game, I can set any button to DRS, pit entry, radio commands, MFD, and more. It makes the game a lot more realistic. Lastly, and this is definitely the most important pro, having a wheel is simply more fun. Yes, it adds to the realism, gives you a more customizable experience, makes you faster, and makes it easier to drive, but when it comes down to it, you're still playing a video game, and games should be fun. I've been lucky enough to have 2 different sim setups in my life, and it really makes my racing game experience so much more enjoyable. On that positive note, let's go to the cons. The first con is pretty obvious, and that's money. Sim racing is expensive, plain and simple. Even when purchasing an entry-level package, you still have to fork over a couple $100, and that's not easy. Not to mention already paying for a console or a PC, and also purchasing the games you want to play. The money is definitely the biggest drawback when it comes to sim racing. Along with the basic premise of spending a lot for a setup comes with the desire for upgrades. As soon as you've gotten used to your wheel, it's inevitable that you'll want more because it's so fun. You'll want to get a stick shift or a handbrake, or maybe you'll want a formula wheel. Maybe you want to invest in a kill switch for more realism, or even a better wheelbase. These upgrades are quite expensive, and there's always going to be stuff you want to add to your setup. Lastly, another con is addiction. This goes hand in hand with upgrades. The more you play, the more you want to play. The more you want to play, the more stuff you want to buy. On top of this, it's quite easy to spend hours upon hours on your setup trying to perfect that lap time in time trials or learn a track for the first time. Don't get me wrong, it's insanely fun, but I've definitely upped my playtime since switching to a wheel instead of using a controller. Overall, the pros definitely outweigh the cons, but the biggest determining factor is money. So let's talk about what your hard-earned cash can get you in the world of sim racing. Going back to our price and quality comparisons, I'm going to give you my personal recommendation for a setup depending on your budget, and give you the best bang for your buck. If you've never had a sim setup before and are desperate to get your hands on one immediately, you have to consider your budget. If you have a couple $100 to spend but no more than that, I definitely recommend looking into the Logitech G29 or G920. These are more entry-level pieces of equipment, but the quality for the price is absolutely worth it. These are widely used and really popular, so you can't really go wrong. They also offer strong technical specifications and give you a pretty good experience for your money. If you have $300 or $400 to spend, my personal recommendation is not to spend that at Thrustmaster. Granted, I've never personally used a Thrustmaster wheel, but for the money you invest in those products, you're getting a decent experience, but nothing over the top. Thrustmaster offers a wide range of products which definitely allows for more accessibility and customization, but the overall experience with their products has mixed reviews. Personally, if you have $400 to spend, I cannot recommend Fanatec enough. Their entry-level package, as mentioned before, comes with a direct drive wheelbase, steering wheel, and pedals, all for $400, the same price as Thrustmaster. However, Fanatec offers better build quality, a direct drive wheelbase which adds more realism and force feedback, and a great selection of upgrades once you inevitably get addicted. I personally use Fanatec equipment and I've never once had an issue with it. For $400, the Fanatec DD bundle is absolutely worth your money. Now, if you have a higher budget, I still recommend Fanatec. You can purchase the CSL DD, the DD Pro, the Club Sport DD, or the Podium DD1 or DD2 if you really have the money to spend. Along with this, Fanatec has a huge variety of steering wheels to choose from, with pretty much every price range possible. The pedal sets are a bit more limited in terms of options, but they have one for every price range as well. The Fanatec accessories are also great, and boast the same amazing build quality that every other one of their products shares. Overall, if you have upwards of $700 to spend, Fanatec is no question the gear you want to invest in. It's important to note that I'm in no way sponsored or paid by Fanatec to say these things, I'm just sharing my personal experience and research. So let's recap. For $0 to $300, Logitech is a good bet. You can buy a brand new one for $300 or see if there's any used ones online for less. For $300 to $500, choose the Fanatec bundles over the Thrustmaster ones. Fanatec has a better build quality and experience, so it's a better bang for your buck. Lastly, if you have $700 or more, again, stick with Fanatec. They have a huge range of options and accessories to personalize your experience based on the games you like to play. If you have any questions about this, feel free to leave a comment below or join my Discord, which is linked in the description. Now that we've covered all the basics, as a bonus, I'll show you my personal setup along with the prices for each item. Now, an important thing to note is that I've created this setup over the course of a few years, so don't be completely discouraged if you haven't gotten into sim racing yet. For starters, I have a chair. More specifically, it's the Playseat Challenge. I purchased this on Amazon for around $170 3 years ago, and it's been fantastic. It folds in half if you need to store it, and it can support almost any wheelbase you want because it has a very diverse drilling template. It also has an adjustable layout for pedals, and using the Velcro on the side, you can drop the seat low, like in a Formula car, or raise it higher to sit more upright. I have no complaints with this chair. Next is my wheelbase, which is the Fanatec Podium DD1. I purchased this one 3 years ago for around $1,100, which is definitely a hefty price tag. It was a little annoying because right after I purchased this, they announced the smaller direct drive wheelbase for half the price, and I probably would have gotten that one instead of these had they been available at the time. Nonetheless, the DD1 has been absolutely fantastic. It has tons of customization in the force feedback settings and really offers a realistic experience. I haven't had any issues with this wheelbase, and I've definitely gotten my money's worth so far. Next are my steering wheels. Yes, plural. First, I have the Formula V2 wheel from Fanatec, which ran me around $350 when I purchased it. I've used this wheel mainly for Assetto Corsa and the F1 titles for 3 years. This wheel is awesome, I can't recommend it enough. Next is my Club Sport Hub flat V2 wheel, and this one is a little bit more complicated. The back of the wheel and all the buttons is a hub, and you can attach multiple different steering wheel rims to it. This is awesome for customization. I haven't used this wheel too much yet, but so far it's been great. This one was around $300 on sale. Next is the pedals, of which I have 2 sets. My current pedals are the CSL Elite pedals with a load cell brake kit. So far these pedals have been absolutely amazing. The load cell kit for braking is absolutely insane, and it has tons of customization for brake pressure. These were $200 on sale. However, my older set of pedals was the CSL Elite pedals, without a clutch and load cell kit. These pedals were $200, and I cannot recommend them enough. The brake actually had a foam block underneath it in order to create pressure, which I thought would eventually soften up, but I was wrong. The foam remained firm for the entire time I used them. These pedals were a great purchase. Lastly, I have my 2 most recent accessories. The first is my Club Sport shifter, which I got for $150 on sale. So far, it's been awesome. It has both a 7-speed H-pattern mode and a sequential shifting mode. The build quality is impeccable, and it's really satisfying to shift through the gears in H-pattern mode. The sequential mode is great too, and the ability to switch back and forth is awesome for games like WRC. My second new accessory is the Fanatec handbrake, which I got for $100 on sale. It took a while to actually learn how to connect it, as I had to update my firmware first, but so far it's been super cool to have. It's definitely not the most necessary addition to my setup, but I've loved it so far. Overall, the price of my setup is roughly $2,600. Yes, that's a shitload of money, however, it's been built up over a few years. Also, keep in mind that my wheelbase makes up almost half that cost at $1,100, but Fanatec now offers wheelbases at a much lower price. I also have 2 wheels and 2 sets of pedals. If I only had 1 wheel and 1 set, I would cut that price in half as well. This speaks to the addiction and upgrades I mentioned earlier in the video. As I mentioned before, this is a pretty serious setup, and I do not want to discourage anyone from getting into sim racing because of my own setup. This is a luxury. If you want to purchase sim racing equipment for yourself, there are tons of options out there. You don't have to be an idiot like me and have this much expensive stuff. Sim racing is a total blast, and if you love cars or often play racing games, it's absolutely, positively, definitely worth your money. Switching from a controller to a wheel is night and day, and you'll be very glad you did. I hope my price guides and recommendations could help you out, and again, if you have any questions, especially about my setup or experience, feel free to leave a comment down below or in my Discord. That being said, again, I hope this video helped you out, and if you made it this far, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.